In this exercise, I'm going to show you how to create the most useful kind of opacity mask there is, and that's a gradient opacity mask. I've saved my changes as conceal and reveal.ai, so called because we have this square here inside the opacity mask, and that's where I'm working right now. So I'm midstream on this project. I've got this square that's set to black, so it's concealing the contents of the layer, and I have this circle that's set to white, so it's revealing the contents of the layer. And they're both movable, by the way. You can move them anywhere you want, and they'll continue to conceal and reveal as you go. If you want the opposite behavior, I'll just show you this. You can turn on the Invert Mask checkbox, which goes ahead and reverses the objects, not the background, just the objects, so that black is now concealing and white is now revealing. I think that's insane, so I'm going to go ahead and turn that checkbox back off, but Illustrator is nothing if not flexible. All right, well, let's say you want to keep these objects around here. You don't want to get rid of them. Why, you can just go ahead and turn them off inside the Layers panel. So I could twirl open that opacity mask layer, and I could turn off the eyeballs for both of these paths. That way I can keep them around if I want to bring them back later. There's no reason I would in this case. I just want you to see that you have all the flexibility of the Layers panel here inside the opacity mask. You can even name objects and add layers if you want to. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom out a click and scroll down too so that I can take in the entire bottom of this illustration. And I'm going to switch back to my rectangle tool, either by selecting it or pressing the M key. Because if we're going to create a gradient, we have to put it inside something. So I'll go ahead and draw a big rectangle around this area like so. And the rectangle comes in for me with a white fill, no stroke. That's great. That way I can see the contents of the layer as I work on it. And I don't want a stroke, by the way. That could ruin the effect if I'm not careful. Just better not to have one. All right, now let's go to the gradient panel. I do want to fill this guy with a black to white gradient. That way the black area is concealing, the white area is revealing, and then I'm creating a gradient reveal in between. So I'm going to grab my current fill color in the color panel, and I'm going to drag it down into the gradient panel like so. And that's just a precaution, just in case I didn't have a black to white gradient already set up in advance. It looked like I did, but might as well be deliberate about these things. But I want this gradient to go from black to white, not from white to black, just because I guess that's the way I think. I'm not sure why, but I'll go over here to reverse gradient and click on it. So I start with black and I end with white, and I'm clicking on that color swatch just to ensure that it really is 100% black, because if it's anything less than 100%, then it's going to be a little bit of a reveal. It's mostly going to conceal, but not entirely. I want to make sure it starts with an absolute conceal. And then I'll grab my gradient tool, or press the G key in order to get my gradient annotator, and I'm going to drag from the bottom of the illustration up like so to about this location here, right about at the center of the top letters. And I end up concealing the bottom of the layer, revealing the top of the layer, and creating a fade in between, a nice gradual fade. Now, I can continue to modify this gradient to my heart's content, but at this point I think I'd like to reduce the opacity of this layer a little bit. If you switch to the transparency panel and change that opacity value there, then you're going to change the opacity of the layer mask. That is the selected object on the layer mask, this rectangle in particular. You're not going to affect the layer. If you want to affect the layer, you have to click on its thumbnail to switch back to the layer. That's the only way, by the way, to escape out of the opacity mask. You can't press the escape key and there's no other keyboard shortcut. You just click on that thumbnail and you're back. And now, with the layer active, you can see that it's meatballed there in the layers panel. I'll go ahead and change that opacity value to 50% and then press the return key or the enter key on the Mac. And you know, something I should mention here, just as an FYI, I'm going to go ahead and zoom in. I'm trying to center the zoom on screen so that I can see the majority of my illustration. If I add any sort of object to this 50% layer right here, because the layer is meatballed and it's the layer that's changed to 50%, or it could be a blend mode or anything else, this opacity mask affects the translucency as well. Anything I add to this layer will come in similarly at 50% with the layer mask in charge. So for example, if I just draw a rectangle here, and in this case it happens to be filled with a gradient, that's fine. It doesn't really matter because I'm going to get rid of it in a moment. But even though its opacity is set to 100% and the blend mode is set to normal, I can see through this object. Check it out. If I take this rectangle and I drag it to a different location so that it covers up another object, and this is a poor demonstration because my reflection 2 layer is below bulb and lines, I'll go ahead and drag it on top just for the sake of demonstration here. Notice that even though this is an absolutely opaque object, I can see through it, And that's because the layer, and therefore everything that goes on that layer, is set to 50% opacity. So I just want you to have a sense of the amazing power of working with all these transparency settings here in Illustrator. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and click off the path outline to deselect everything. I'll then click on this rectangle to reselect it, press the backspace key or the delete key on the Mac to get rid of it, and move the Reflection 2 layer back to its original location below bulb and lines. In the next exercise, I'm going to create an object-specific opacity mask that affects just the translucency of this reflected text.